When I look to the future, I feel scared. What if I can't do what I need to do?
Libby mentioned Phil Hammond, the Chancellor, and the government generally. What have ministers been saying to you?
Well, we often hear councils, don't we, blaming funding cuts by central government. So we asked the Department of Health for an interview with Jeremy Hunt, our health minister. They wouldn't put anyone up. Instead, they gave us a statement saying that vulnerable people must get prompt, dignified care, and they say that the government's trying to find a long-term, sustainable solution. And as Libby said, with the budget coming up next month, lots of people like Jane will be hoping they put up more money.
All right, we shall watch with great interest. Rebecca, thank you. Malaysian police have now arrested 3 suspects in connection with the murder of Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Nam was apparently killed by 2 women who splashed his face with a chemical at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Martha Fairley with the latest.
In North Korea, the nation is celebrating. An extravagant firework display marking the 75th anniversary of the birth of its late leader, Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un paid his respects at the palatial mausoleum. But standing in the shadow of his father's portrait, this son is now suspected of ordering the assassination of his half-brother. Malaysian authorities now say the man reportedly poisoned by 2 women at Kuala Lumpur Airport on Monday was Kim Jong-nam. He'd been living in exile for years and was carrying a passport with the name Kim Chol. Malaysia's Deputy Prime Minister said DNA tests had confirmed his identity.
I think after all the police and medical procedures is completed, then we may release the body to the next of and through embassy.
An Indonesian woman and a Malaysian man have been arrested in connection with the death. They're being held with another woman, although it's still not known if she's the same person seen in these CCTV images released yesterday. Mystery still surrounds why Kim Jong-nam would have been targeted. This rare family portrait shows him sitting next to his father, Kim Jong-il. But despite being the eldest son, he'd long said he wasn't interested in the North Korean leadership. And while a post-mortem examination has now been completed, details of how he died have not yet been released. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Here, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has announced a £40 million fund to help tackle child sexual exploitation. The measures will see a new centre of expertise launched and £2.2 million handed to charities working to protect children at risk of trafficking. The funding aims to bolster the government's efforts to prevent a repeat of scandals seen in Rotherham, Rochdale and Oxford.
I believe that this will make a difference. It's £40 million worth of support. It's about helping the children who have been victims, but it's also about focusing on how we can prevent the children becoming victims, and it's also about going after the offenders.
Well, joining me live in the studio is Adam Pemberton, who's the Corporate Director of Strategy and Performance at Barnardo's. In principle, I know you'll say it's a breakthrough, but the numbers, thin gruel.
Well, we're delighted that Barnardo's has been asked to lead this service because it's a real opportunity for us to learn and deepen our understanding about this crime. And that in turn should help us not only to protect young people and to make sure we support them to help them recover, but very importantly, also to learn how we can prevent them becoming victims in the first place.
But before you get to that point, precisely so, all of the criticisms at places like Rochdale and Oxford and what have you were about the police and about the social services. You come in and pick the pieces up.
Well, the Centre of Expertise is actually a partnership not only with charities but also with the police, with schools, with health and local authorities, because it's very important that we learn about what everyone is doing and join that up. We can do a lot better if we understand what works and we can invest in that. And so the centre will really understand where we've got good practice and share that knowledge so that we can do more with the resources we've got. Clearly, more funding is always welcome, but we can do more with the funding we have.
I mean, most people listening will think £2.2 million is a lot of money. What can it practically achieve if you've now got that to spend on this centre?
Well, the centre is actually £7.5 million of funding up until 2020. So it is about using that money to look at what works. But, that will mean looking at all sorts of services that are provided across the country. So Barnardo's, for example, provides a service called Real Love Rocks, which has trained 1,000 teaching professionals about how to work with children to help them to keep safe, to protect themselves, and to understand what healthy relationships are. There's lots of really good work going out there, and we can do more if we understand it better, know what works, and can share that with everybody.
I mean, in a nutshell, it's the dissemination of best practice across the piece.
Exactly, yes. There's an awful lot of work going on here. Barnardo's has been working in this field for over 20 years, and many others have as well. So what this centre can do for the first time is draw that together so that we're all getting a much better understanding of this crime and can hopefully deal with it better in future.
Adam Pemberton from Barnardo's, thanks for coming in, and we wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Still to come, do we need a substitute for sunshine? As a new report suggests, we all need more vitamin D. And why 6 is the magic number when it comes to containing our frustrations at the back of a queue. But first, more than 1,000 people have fled their homes in New Zealand, where wildfires are burning out of control. Christchurch and the surrounding area is in a state of emergency as the flames spread, and a pilot has been killed in the rescue effort. Chris Cunningham has the latest.
A wall of flames bearing down on the New Zealand city of Christchurch. This massive wildfire broke out on Monday and has already claimed the life of one of the helicopter pilots trying to fight it. At least 11 homes have been destroyed so far, and hundreds more are still at risk. A state of emergency has been declared and the military has been deployed to help firefighters. How the fire started is still unclear, but arson has not been ruled out. And with fires now covering an area close to 2,000 hectares, it's a daunting task to bring it under control.
It is going to take weeks because it is going to smoulder. There will be outbreaks from time to time. The wind could change while we're speaking, and that would make a difference.
The people of Christchurch are no strangers to natural disaster. In 2011, a 6.3 magnitude quake left much of the city in ruins and killed 185 people. The country's Prime Minister, Bill English, came to show his support and praise the resilience of the people of Christchurch.
There's a whole lot of people here who've been traumatised by the events, some who've lost their homes, many who've been evacuated. And this is a community that knows how to stick together when things are difficult.
With 450 homes already evacuated by police and hundreds more people deciding to leave as a precaution, thousands in this community are anxious for their homes and for their lives. Chris Cunningham, ITV News.
Here, the global president of General Motors has flown into London this lunchtime for an emergency meeting with the business secretary and the Unite Union. The talks were hastily arranged after it emerged the company was considering selling off Vauxhall and Opel. That could threaten thousands of jobs at factories in Ellesmere Port and Luton. Well, our business editor, Joel Hills, is live outside the talks now. Any sales, surely, Joel, is still some way off. Why so much anxiety?
Well, look, a deal hasn't been done yet, but it looks pretty clear that General Motors is looking to offload its struggling European operation. And if PSA, the owner of Peugeot and Citroën, is the buyer, then there will almost certainly be factory closures. And the anxiety here today has been that some of those will be in Britain. Early this morning, Dan Amann, the president of General Motors, arrived. He flew in from Germany first thing for a meeting with the business secretary, Greg Clark. He also had a meeting here at BIS, or BAYS as it's called nowadays, with the General Secretary of Unite, the union, Len McCluskey. The talks broke up a short while ago. This is what Len McCluskey had to say.
What is pretty clear is that the negotiations with Peugeot are advanced, and more concrete proposals are imminent. We're not talking about days, but equally we're not talking about months.
It's a sign of the times that I now have to tell you, standing outside the department, that the department have just issued a brief statement on Press Association saying that the UK Business Minister says he is reassured by General Motors' intention to build on the success of its UK Vauxhall operations rather than rationalise them. Translate and comment, Mr Hills.
Well, that looks like a commitment of sorts, doesn't it, from the company given to the government to continue building vehicles in some capacity in Britain. The question, of course, is what did the government offer in return? Was there a post-Brexit sweetheart deal, the sort that we saw the government give to Nissan, the details of which we still don't know? Here's the thing, though. General Motors builds cars all over Europe, in France, in Germany, in Spain, as well as here in Britain. And the British operations, the economic case for keeping them open, isn't necessarily that strong. The workforce at Ellesmere Port in particular is extremely productive, but so much of the Astra that's built there is actually assembled from parts imported from the EU. The Brexit vote has actually hit the Vauxhall business in a way that most people didn't expect. It's probably loss-making. And let's bear in mind, PSA, the biggest shareholder, is the French government. It is unthinkable it will wave a deal through that leads to job losses in France, Alistair.
Joel, thank you. Known as the sunshine vitamin, vitamin D has been linked to bone health, but a new study suggests that it could also hold the key to beating colds and flu. 70% of people in the UK have at least one respiratory illness a year, but regular supplements could reduce the chance of infection by 12%. That, according to researchers at London's Queen Mary University, meaning 3 million fewer people would become infected every year. The current guidelines suggest that adults and children over the age of 1 should take vitamin D supplements during autumn and winter. But could that now change? Well, joining me live from Westminster is Professor Louis Levy from Public Health England. Very good of you to join us, and thank you very much indeed. You've already said this morning that the research isn't conclusive, but 11,000 people, 25 separate studies, surely it's a slam dunk.
Well, it's an interesting study that brings together the work of other studies, but in and of itself it's not very clear, given that quite a lot of the influence is from a small number of studies with small numbers of children who are ill. So it does seem to suggest that if you have a low level of vitamin D, it may help in reducing acute respiratory infections, but it's not sufficient. We already have
It does surprise me slightly, sorry to interrupt, but only because time is against us. As far as the United States administration's concerned, they're completely sold on the idea, and milk, for example, is all there with vitamin D supplement. If it's good enough for the Americans, why is it not good enough for us?
Well, in America, they have taken a different perspective in what is the requirement. We reviewed this, or our Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition reviewed this and concluded last year that we needed, in the absence of sunlight, we needed about 10 micrograms a day for bone health. And they were unable to find any impact or insufficient evidence that would allow us to set a recommendation based on any other health condition. So we already have advice that would help people who already have low intakes to improve that. And 80% of the population during the summer already have blood levels of vitamin D that are sufficient. So
with your hand upon your heart, Professor, reassure folk listening to this conversation that it's not you running scared of industrial interests. I mean, the poor old dairy farmers who are hard-pressed enough, they say, I don't want to get involved in this. You're absolutely 100% convinced that it is the medical case that remains as yet unproven.
So the Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition looked at this last year. The advice based on their recommendations is on NHS choices, and it suggests that during the spring and summer we get enough vitamin D from the action of sunlight on our skin, so going outside and eating a healthy, balanced diet. Some people do need to take supplements all year round, so a 10 microgram supplement if you don't go out in the sun or you cover up. Other people, if they've got dark skin, may need to consider taking a supplement. And the rest of us, between autumn and winter, may need to take supplements if we don't eat foods that naturally contain or are fortified with vitamin D. But
right,
generally
Professor
speaking,
Levy,
that's going to be about bone health.
Got you loud and clear. Apologies for interrupting there, and thank you so much for your time this lunchtime. Now, a teenager has appeared in court to deny murdering 7-year-old Katie Ruff. The youngster was found with severe wounds to her neck and chest on a playing field in York last month and died later in hospital. A 15-year-old girl was arrested and charged with her murder. The President of the Supreme Court has accused sections of the press of, and I quote, undermining the rule of law in coverage of the Article 50 case. Lord Neuberger also claimed that politicians could have been quicker and clearer after the High Court ruling. The Prime Minister did not have the power to start the Brexit process without the consent of Parliament. And Waitrose, Iceland and Marks & Spencer have topped a Which? Supermarket consumer satisfaction survey of more than 7,000 shoppers. Asda finished last in the in-store table. And finally, why the way we queue is governed by a rule of 6. Psychologists at University College London have been studying our queuing etiquette and say people tend to queue for 6 minutes before giving up in frustration. And if there's more than 6 in the queue, well, people are just less likely to join. As Susan Verdi explains.
We Brits are pretty well known for queuing, but now scientists have worked out the psychology of just what we'll put up with and what we won't.
Some people don't like being crowded, they don't like being anxious. People will queue longer if there's some distraction. They'll queue longer if there's some idea when things are coming. You know, the buses have learned this, the next bus in 10 minutes. It might not be 10 minutes, but people will be happier if they think there's an opportunity for predicting how long they'll take.
According to the research, we're unlikely to join a queue of more than 6 people. And when we do join the queue, we're unlikely to wait in it for more than 6 minutes before we get really irritated and want to leave. Unless, that is, we look behind and we see 6 or more people queuing. Then we've invested our time and we think it's worth the wait. So is it true?
If I'm hungry, I'll definitely queue for food, if it's free food.
And if you're queuing for a rugby match at Twickenham, then I'll queue for as long as it takes to get in the ground.
Would you ever say, excuse me, I think you're a queue jumper?
I'd be thinking it, but I probably wouldn't do it.
All in all, the research tells us probably what many of us already knew. Our tempers get short when the queues get long. Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
And that is it this lunchtime. Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the weather. But for now, from all of us, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.